What's going on, my PT peeps, my Walking Dead family, and my fighters? I'm One Eye Bri, also known as PT, and I'm back to talk about The Walking Dead. Spoiler warning for The Walking Dead show, comics, all that stuff. I don't know what you know, but we're going to talk about the show and the comic and how the show is the show and the comic is the comic. We'll talk about some differences and some things that if you don't know, if you don't read the comics, we'll highlight it a little bit. It's a kind of a fun discussion video, but let me know your thoughts, post your comments below. And as we're coming up on season 10B, some things may happen from the comic to the show. But first, guys, if you can, please hit that subscribe button, tell your friends, tell your family. It's a call to action. We have a goal of 100,000 subscribers, so help us out and subscribe today. Ring the bell to get notifications and hit the join button to become a member of our membership program. Now, the basis for the show is the comic. The comic is the source material, the graphic novel, whatever you want to call it. Now, without the comic, there is no show. Now, some people seem to think that the show can survive without the comic material because the comic just ended July 2019 with issue 193, and it could, but it's kind of a stretch in my eyes that they could continue on for many more seasons without the source material, but we'll have to see what they want to do and how they want to do it. But the show is the show and the comic is the comic, and a lot of the comic characters were in the show, but there are characters that are just for the show, and I'm very thankful that they were, because a lot of the great characters that are just for the show weren't in the comic at all, and it's pretty nice to see that. Lori, Andrea, pretty terrible in the show, but comic Andrea was far better. So I bring up the question, who was better in the comic and who was better on the show? Now, you can't say Daryl because Daryl's just for the show and Jerry's just for the show, and a lot of characters like Simon are just for the show. Well, not a lot, but you know what I'm talking about. But Andrea, far better in the comic. Carol, much better on the show. And I'm glad to see those differences. Melissa McBride is a great actress, and she brings a lot to the show. Without her, the show would be very different. And I actually love the Carol character on the show, and the comic character was a little crazy and a little out there. And it's a great point because the comic can get away with things versus the show. The Shane character I thought was pretty great. The Shane character is debated. Is he a villain? Is he a good guy? Do you like Shane? Do you love Shane? Do you hate Shane? It's divided for sure. But the Shane character I thought was pretty good in both the comic and the show. As for the governor, far worse in the comic than the show because AMC has limitations what they can do, what they can say, what they can actually bring to the television screen. The comic, you can get away with so much more. The governor, I would say, was far better in the comic. Well, far worse, but far better in the comic, you know what I mean. Carl, that's debatable because he never truly got to live out so much of his story arc for the Whisperer War as he gets killed off in season 8 of the Walking Dead show, but he was the end of the comic. Is that story going to go to Judith? Most likely. Carl, to me, was much better in the comic because he lasted far longer. Michonne, great in both aspects. I love Michonne in both ways, but I have to say Denai Guerrero brings another level to the character. So I'm going to go with Michonne is better on the show versus the comic, even though Michonne is going away on the show in the second half of season 10. I can't wait to see what happens, even though I'm going to miss her a lot. Now, Negan, far better in the comic because he can get away with so much more. He can be the crazy over the top with the dialogue and the gestures. It just worked better in the comic. On the show, it's almost laughable, it's comical, it just comes off as cheesy and a little over the top. Even though I do love Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Negan is far better in the comic, in my opinion. As for Daryl and Myrtle, the Dixon brothers, they do not exist in the comic. They were made for the show. It was actually just Myrtle Dixon. Norman Reedus tried out for the part of Myrtle, even though they cast Michael Rooker, and they gave the Dixon brothers a chance, and I'm glad they did because Daryl is very important to the show, and I love the character. As for Negan and Alpha, what's going to happen with them in the back half of season 10? I feel that Negan takes out Alpha, just like in the comic. It fits the mold, it fits what's going to happen, it just fits the story much better if it happens that way. Could Carol do it? For sure, but was Negan let out by Carol? I think so. The comic Carol Negan story arc doesn't happen because Carol is killed off way before this angle. Negan takes out Alpha, and it's pretty great. As for Maggie, what do you think? Better in the comic or the show? I love Lauren Cohan, and she brings a lot to the show, even though she went away. I do like the character in both aspects, even though there's more of a story arc in the comics. I'm excited for her to return in the back half of season 10 into season 11. We have some information potentially for the back half of season 10. Check out the video that we posted yesterday with this thumbnail. Spoiler warning, of course. Obviously, there's some poster board and some behind the scenes stuff that we may see in the back half of season 10. I'm super excited for the comic to come to the show. But what do you think? Comic Rick or show Rick? Which is better? And that's a tough one. Andrew Lincoln brought a lot to the character, but he left the show in season 9, episode 5. Hopefully he'll come back for the movies and it'll be great, and we'll continue on with the Rick Grimes story. I gotta give it to the comic. Comic Rick was a lot different, more story arc, made it basically to the end. We'll have to see what happens, so let me know your thoughts and post your comments below. And for those interested in my zombie apocalypse book series, Fight For Us is the name. The link to all 11 books is in the description below. I hope you join the fight and pick up your copy today. Fight For Us, and tell them, Daryl.
Yo, we love you guys. Honestly, thank you.